You have seen this wall 1,000 times. A stone spine crawling over green mountains, watchtowers standing every few hundred meters, the most expensive defensive structure any civilization has ever attempted. It was built to stop one thing. And on a spring morning in 1644, it did not fail, it did not crack, and it was not stormed. Someone unlocked it from the inside. The man who did it was a Ming general named Wu Sangui, and he was standing at Shanhai Pass, the point where the wall runs down out of the hills and ends in the gray water of the Bohai Sea. The gate there was called the First Pass Under Heaven. Behind him lay the road to Beijing. In front of him waited a Manchu army that had been trying to get through that gate for a generation. He opened it. The dynasty that rode through ruled China for the next 268 years. So why would the empire's most important soldier hand over the door? To understand that, you first have to give up the wall you are picturing. The historian Arthur Waldron spent a career pulling that image apart, and his argument is uncomfortable. The long brick wall in the photographs is not ancient. Most of it was built in the 16th century by the Ming themselves, and it was not the product of confidence. It is what a government builds when it can no longer afford to fight in the north and can no longer negotiate with the people who live there. A wall is not a strategy. It is what is left when the strategy runs out. And it had already been beaten. Not broken, beaten. In 1629, a Manchu army simply went around the eastern end, entered through passes further west, and raided within sight of Beijing's own walls. They did it again in the 1630s. The lesson was obvious to anyone paying attention. A wall is not stone. A wall is the men standing on it, and men need grain, silver, and a reason to stay. By the 1640s, the Ming could supply none of the three. Why not? Look at the sky. In 2008, a team led by the geochemist Zhang Pingzhang published a study in the journal Science, built from a stalagmite in Wangshan Cave in Gansu, a mineral column that had quietly recorded 18 centuries of monsoon strength, one layer at a time. The weakest monsoons, the driest stretches, line up with the collapse of the Tang, the Yuan, and the Ming. That is a correlation, not a verdict, and the researchers said so themselves. But it matches everything else. The historian Timothy Brooke describes the final Ming decades as a pileup. Drought, then flood, then locusts, then epidemic, arriving on a population already squeezed by rising taxes to pay for the war in the north. Picture a farmer in Shanxi. The rain does not come. The tax collector does. And somewhere in that same province was a man whose government job had been abolished in a budget cut. A courier on the imperial postal relay, one of thousands laid off to save money. His name was Li Zicheng. He became the most dangerous rebel in China. By the spring of 1644, his army was walking into cities that opened their gates rather than starve for an emperor who could not feed them. On the 25th of April, he took Beijing. The Chongzhen emperor climbed the hill behind his own palace and hanged himself from a tree. 276 years of Ming rule ended on a slope overlooking the city it had built. Wu Sangui learned all of this while marching. He had been ordered to abandon the frontier and save the capital, and the capital was already gone. Now think about where that left him. Behind him, a rebel who had killed his emperor and was holding his father hostage in Beijing. In front of him, the Manchus. Under him, the last professional field army the Ming possessed. He could not stay neutral. There is a famous story that he made his choice over a woman, that Li Zicheng's men seized his concubine, Chen Yuan, and that rage did the rest. It is a wonderful story. It is also mostly a poem, made famous by the writer Wu Weiye a generation later, and historians treat it as literature rather than evidence. The politics are enough on their own. Wu wrote to the Manchu regent Dorgan, uncle of a 6-year-old emperor, and asked for help against the rebels. Dorgan agreed, on his own terms, and those terms were not help. In late May, the armies met outside Shanhai Pass. Accounts describe wind and blown sand, Wu's exhausted men fighting Li's exhausted men through it. And then the Qing cavalry, arriving into a battle that was already half spent. Li Zicheng ran. He was dead within a year. And here is the part the story usually skips. Dorgan did not go home. He went to Beijing, sat a Manchu child on the Chinese throne, and began issuing orders, including the command that Chinese men shave their foreheads and wear the queue, a hairstyle that turned obedience into something you could see from across a street. Frederick Wakeman, whose 2-volume study of this conquest is still the standard account, called the whole thing the Great Enterprise. And his point is that it was not a moment. It took decades. Cities in the south had to be taken one at a time, and some of them, like Yangzhou, were destroyed as an example to the rest. Wu Sangui spent those years doing the conquering. He hunted the last Ming claimant into Burma and had him executed. He was rewarded with enormous power in the southwest, and then, in 1673, when the Qing moved to take that power back, he rebelled against the dynasty he had personally led in. He died of illness in 1678, with his revolt collapsing around him. His grandson was hunted down. His family line was ended. The man who opened the door was crushed by what came through it. And the wall? It stopped mattering almost immediately. The Qing now ruled both sides of it, Manchuria, Mongolia, and eventually far beyond. So the greatest defensive line ever built became an interior wall, a line running through the middle of a single empire, guarding nothing from nobody. Its towers emptied. Its bricks were carried off by villagers to build houses and pigsties. Only much later, when foreign travelers arrived with cameras and a taste for ruins, did it become the symbol the world knows today. So look at those photographs again. Everyone reads them as a story about strength, about a barrier that held for centuries against everything the steppe could throw at it. And it did hold. The wall never fell. That is exactly the point. No wall is ever stronger than the man holding the key.